witnesses are seeing this guy selling dope. We end up checking this guy to the ground, get him. But from the moment I had this guy handcuffed, I just had this sense. It just made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And as I'm filling out my paperwork, he starts slamming his head against the plexiglass and he's screaming, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?"
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. For those of you who have just seen part one, welcome back. But if you haven't, don't worry, you all need to watch it in order to understand this one. Here's what happened. After barely surviving his hellish childhood, David then enrolled into the military and eventually became a Navy chief. We talked about his time there, and then we dove into some incredibly accurate prophetic dreams that he had during those years. And don't worry, if you're here for the demon-possessed man, we also talked about that story in detail. But you'll have to stick to the end for that one. Although, it probably won't be too hard because the rest of the interview is just as fascinating. Anyway, now that you know, let's dive right into the second half of David's story.
There's some, close calls where we, almost flew in the sides of mountains and lost a number of people. My first deployment, I think we lost, again, like 24 people in the battle group. A couple of buddies of mine died on that deployment. There's so many stories, but, gosh, I can't even hardly think of a crazy one. When on my first rescue, I got bumped by a shark, and what most military guys will tell you, and cops too. When I came back from that rescue, and there was blood in the water, because the guy had a compound fracture of his leg that I was trying. I was in there to rescue, and while I'm underneath the water with all this blood around us, I'm checking his injury out, thinking through my mind what I need to do to help stabilize this before I get him out of the water, even get hoisted up into the helicopter. As I'm thinking through that, I get bumped in the back. And I look over my shoulder, and now going off this way is about what looks like about 11-foot bull shark. And what's interesting about that whole thing is now, getting an air splint, stabilize this injury, nope, let's just get out of here, because I don't know how many other sharks are down here right now smelling this blood in the water. So we get up out of there. So now you come back though from this and you say, hey, I got bumped in the back by a shark, about 11-foot bull shark while I was down there. Oh, Dave made a rescue in a Phoenix frenzy. Sharks everywhere. Oh, these guys, get them in for a medal. I'm like, oh gosh, forget it. Never happened. No sharks. No, man. Cause they're just going to go in on you. And it's that whole thing of like, did you die? Oh, cool story, bro. Here's a mop, whatever. Same thing as a cop. Like you're telling some story where things were sketchy. Did you die? By very senior, experienced cops. It's, you operate in worlds where don't be touting yourself or patting yourself on the back. Don't even tell a story like that. So I let that go for the rest of my life. Like telling it now is one of the few people I've ever told that I got bumped by a shark on my first rescue. But, you do see, even in the peacetime, I was active duty from 81 to 2002, and you see death out there. It's a dangerous operating environment.
Well, I find it fascinating, the human part of military and of service. And most people don't experience that. There's definitely people that are living in certain environments where there's death all around. But for the common mortal in our world, that's not something that most people witness. And I imagine that it changes you. But I want to ask you, what's the hardest part about being involved in these kinds of things, where you see your friends, or you see people that you know, or you see dead bodies? What's the hardest human element?
Well, I will say, especially back then, Gabriel, there was no PTSD. That thing was not a thing. Even when I retired in 2002, you weren't getting help for it. Same thing after I became a police officer. I lost buddies as a police officer, and brutally so. And so, but you don't talk about it. You're not it was not a thing where people are coming up and say, "Hey, man, how are you doing? Hey, maybe you need to go talk to someone." So you eat it, you compartmentalize it, lock it away in these boxes, and put it behind you, and then move forward to the next training, the next mission, the next deployment. That's how it is. So that's just how it has to be, or you can't function. You can't live in the midst of that. And I flew with guys. I'll never forget. There was a particular guy. This is just one example, but he'd been in a very bad helicopter crash, and again, you're operating in an environment out there that, I had 4,000 mission flight hours. Any one of those can go wrong. Pilots can fly in the water, catastrophic failure of a helicopter. You crash, fly into the side of a mountain, do a combat search and rescue training mission or an actual mission, anything could happen. So this guy had been in a crash that, they ended up, impacting the water at a fairly high rate of speed at night. He is the only one survived from his crew. He doesn't even know how he got out. Aircraft just went into pieces. And after he, did some physical recovery, unfortunately, he wasn't really severely injured. Some, fairly minor injuries. Imagining how bad the crash was, it killed everybody else. But he was recovered. After recovered, he was getting back in the aircraft. He showed up to our command, and my leading chief said, "Hey, fly with them, Dave." And so I, flew with him daytime. Daytime, he was okay. But then when the night hit, his hands would be shaking, sweating profusely. And we went back to do a simulated rescue scenario in the back at nighttime. And so I tried to get him on a gunner's belt up in the door. He finally sat down in the seat in the back. He said, "I can't do it." He started crying. That's the thing. It's like the real heroes I know, the guys that I've met since the Global War on Terror and all that started in the U.S. military, guys who were some really hard stuff, severely injured, and they're back in the mission with their buddies. It's like, wow, that's a level of strength, inner strength, that it takes to be in the military. And again, I was never a guy who was blown up, shot up. I was in some sketchy situations, but nothing like direct fire from the enemy like that. That the guys have faced, people have faced now. Canadian military as well. I met a guy who missed his legs in the Canadian military, special operations guy, and it takes a certain level of inner strength to keep pushing forward.
A lot of people don't realize what military life is like, and that there's real people that are going through these things, especially now that war is such a hot topic. And you see people supporting war or wanting that, but they don't understand that there's truly like people like you that are there in the trenches and that are suffering these horrible things. And I think it's important to let people know at least what it's like, even for the guys that don't go through much like you, that it's not even wartime. So I can't even imagine what the people that are on deployment right now are suffering through. But I want to ask you a question with a slightly different angle, because when you enrolled in the military, you were a pretty strong Christian. You had this radical encounter at church that we talked about. And I want to ask you, how did that work out for you in the military and with God?
Sadly, and it's all on me. It's on no one else. I had started to drift away from the war just before I joined the military, and our family stopped going to church and stuff. So I'm in my mind, again, just all spiritual warfare. But I was in a community where it was kind of like party hard today because tomorrow we die. Kind of mindset in a lot of ways, and a lot of it's just excuses. But it's a fraternity like atmosphere, and you're deployed, and I didn't grow up a drinker, and I suffered because of alcoholism in my own family, and I never became an alcoholic, but I did go out with the guys and party, and I finally was still fairly, I don't know, early on in my career, maybe I think fairly distinctly, probably around 1987, it's like 6 years in, and I just thought in my head, like, you can't do this. This Christian life is too hard for you. You might as well just let it go. And at least you won't be a hypocrite. And that's what I told myself. Or I heard that in my mind and believed that lie and went with it because my flesh wanted to believe it. And so I got off into the world. But brother, I got to tell you, if you've known the salvation of the Lord and the love of the Lord and the closeness with the Lord, and you walk off into the world, it's painful. And I cried in my bunk many a time, far from home, rolled over, asking the Lord's forgiveness, knowing it's like, what are you doing? This is not who you are. You cannot live in the world and be this person who God has made you to be. And it's painful. It's painful. But, you know what? The Lord never let me go.
Right. That's what I was going to say too. Exactly. Because he never left you. And while you were on deployment and while you were in the Navy, he still gave you dreams. And the first one I want to reference is a prophetic dream that at the time you didn't fully understand what it meant. But can you explain what happened from what the dream was to how did it become fulfilled?
So I was actually stationed up in the Panhandle of Florida. I was married to my first wife, and I had this very powerful dream where we were on the third floor of the building where I worked, and I was with my team of guys up there, and I was out on the little walkway, and beautiful. I never forget. This dream was very beautiful, like a spring day, gorgeous, sunshine and blue sky, except this tiny little dark cloud, very dark, like black as coal off in the distance, but it was very small. And I turned to my buddies like, "Hey, you guys see this?" Before I could turn back around, it was as if the cloud rushed upon us, engulfed the whole building. Sun blackened out, everything went dark, and the building shook with lightning and thunder. And I remember when it hit, I dove and grabbed the legs of my desk, and then I woke up. And the truth of my marriage was as I began to take harder assignments, or I was willing to take harder assignments, things started to fall apart in our marriage. Let's put it that way. And we had a lot of problems. And going to church and everything, but in the church everything's fine. But you peel back the roof on our house on any given day, not so fine. Especially as I had made it clear that I was going to take the next hardest assignment that I could get my hands on, and it was going to happen because I wanted to promote and do all the hardest missions, do all the things. I'm still driven. And it's part of the military life. And if you marry a military guy, that's part of what you accept. But she had made up her mind not to. And so eventually, she supposedly she left Florida and supposedly was coming out to San Diego, taking on my kids. I have 4 children at the time and taking them on vacation. And just extended. Next thing I know, she calls me. This is what happened. So I'm at that, and I keep saying, "When are you coming home? When are you coming home? What is going on?" And there were all kinds of signs that clearly wasn't going to happen, but I was, ignoring it, trying to placate my own mind. And anyway, but one night I was at the house by myself, and I get this phone call, and she just lays it out to me. Yes, the guy you think I'm involved with, yes, I am involved with him. Yes, we're intimate. You're going to be getting divorce papers in the next couple of days, and that's it. And of course, I immediately broke down. And I said, I gotta go. I hung up the phone. And as true as I'm sitting here before you, Gabriel, I no sooner put the phone on the receiver that lightning and thunder hit, shook the whole house. And I was leaning back against the wall in my bedroom, and it bounced my head off the wall. It was so hard and so vibrating. And then immediately the dream that I had about a year before struck me. And then I realized the Lord was trying to warn me this storm was coming. And I heard this voice in my mind, "David, I tried to warn you." And I was destroyed. I was destroyed. But, I was so tortured by the thoughts of my wife with this guy. I couldn't even sleep out. And I was, demonic forces were attacking me, bro. I can't even tell you. I mean, I was having visions of demons lashing out at me in the darkness of my room by myself, just bitterly, still just crying, and I couldn't get to sleep. And what came to my mind? The 23rd Psalm. And I began to recite the 23rd Psalm to myself, and peace came over me. And God came to me in a very tortured moment in my life and did not abandon me, didn't let me just suffer. He comforted my soul with the 23rd Psalm. And it's to this day, it had always been special to me, but to this day, it still is.
Well, I mean, it's a sad story, but it didn't end that way. You're now remarried, but you had other dreams as well. And the next one was with a church that you went to. Can you explain in detail what the dream was, because the fulfillment of that dream was pretty spot on. So tell me all
Yeah.
about it.
So, so I was remarried. I've been remarried now about 26, almost 27 years. But, my wife and we'd been married, I know, a year or two. And I get invited to this church of an old buddy of mine that knew me when I was stationed out there in San Diego, because I deployed out of San Diego, Coronado for, I don't know, 15, 16 of my 21 years in the Navy. So you knew a lot of people there. He invited me to this church that got started by worship leader from a very large church that I'd gone to when I was out there previously. And so we start going to this church, and I get involved with the worship team. I'm singing with the worship team. And then me and the pastor actually start becoming friends. And then one night, it was actually a night before what was supposed to be a men's prayer breakfast. But all the guys were getting together from the church. They were going to have a prayer breakfast. And anyway, so I have this dream. And in this dream, we were meeting at this junior high school at the time, and the church was. And I don't know, we had 250 people or so at the time, maybe a little bit less. But either way, I'm at this junior high school in the dream with my wife, and we're walking like in the offices of this junior high school. I didn't know what do we do in the office, but I knew that's where we were. And I'm holding her by the hand, and as we're walking down the hall, I start hearing these blood curdling screams. Like, what is going on? So I kind of held my wife back, and I said, let's go. And we're running down the hallway, but I stop at the corner, and I kind of edge in the corner just to see, look around. And what I see is devastating. And as soon as I see it, I push my wife back, and I see this enormous creature, like it's like half man. It's almost like a werewolf type of thing, like half man, half beast, like some skin, some fur, this head that's grotesque, almost werewolfish head. And there it was. Those teeth that I told you about, those conical, perfectly pearly white fitting teeth. This thing is like 8.5 feet tall, enormous, muscled, with these incredibly long arms that are just huge and muscly. And there were those claws again, like knives. And it had, I'll never forget, I saw it distinctly. I knew there were more, but it had two families I could see clearly. I'm talking families, the men, the wife, the kids, and it was quietly, it made no sound, and it was lashing them to pieces with these enormous claws, enormous arms, like so much power. And I grabbed my wife by the hand. I said, we have to run and tell the pastor and his wife. And I won't mention their names, but we had to run and tell them. And so in the dream, now I'm running with my wife. Next thing you know, we're by the beach. I'm like, Trevor, what if we have it suddenly on the beach? But either way, I know that over there, that's their house. So we're running to it. I don't see anybody in the front. So we run to the back of the house, and there was like tables and tablecloths and chairs and stuff set up like they were going to have a get together from the church at their house. But when I turn the corner and look, I got to push my wife back, say, stay back. And there's this thing is already there, and it's got them pinned against the back of their house. And it's walking up on them. So I run, I grab one, it's like a big, heavy wooden lounge chair. And I grab it and I run up to it. I smash it on the back hard as I could. The chair just splintered into a million pieces. And it didn't make a difference, didn't make a mark. And I'll never forget, Gabriel, this thing stopped and turned its head sideways. I could see this grimacing, those teeth, and this smirk. And he, with his dead eyes, he looked over his shoulder at me, and he spoke to my mind, just like he spoke to my mind when I was a little kid without moving his mouth. I mean, I've heard people say, demons don't know what you're thinking. They can only know what you say. No, they know exactly what you're thinking all the time. They speak to your mind, and they know what you think. So he said, there's nothing you can do. And so I grabbed my wife by the hand. I didn't want her to get hurt. I already seen what this thing was capable of, right? And I run around the front of the house again with her. And then suddenly we're past the house. Now we're down by the beach again. I look over and now like starkness, like totally different. I see this group of people, mostly young, but some older, coming up out of the ocean. They're wearing these beautiful, shining, white, glittering robes. And they've got these palm branches in their hands. And off these palm branches are coming these golden sparkles, like a sparkle that you might have lit up. And their mouths are open. They are singing this in unison, this beautiful song to heaven. I know they're singing to the Lord. And they're coming up out of the water. And then I woke up. What I knew about this dream immediately, without anything else being told, it was told to my mind. I knew immediately that demon, that was a demon in that dream. That was a demon of pornography, sexual sin, adultery. I knew it. I knew that dream was telling me that thing is in our church, tearing these men and their families apart. He's after our pastor and his wife and his family. The other part, other stuff I didn't know yet, but I knew that's what it was. Now I wake up in the morning, my heart's racing. I'm going to this men's prayer breakfast, and I'm not kidding you. I roll up in the driveway of this guy's house, really nice house up in San Diego. Knock on the door. A guy opens the door. Is the first guy I saw in the dream.
Hey, I'm interrupting to tell you that we have a brand new merch line that just dropped. 4 new designs are available. Go check them out. They're awesome, and they allow you to plant seeds without preaching. Every purchase also helps to support the channel. So if you like what I do here, consider checking them out on unashamed.ca. The link is also in the description. Thank you. I love you. Now let's get back to the interview.
What do I say to him?
And that's the morning that you woke up. You had that dream that same night.
The morning I woke up.
And it's right after, a few hours after.
That same night. Yeah, right before I woke up, I had this dream. And so what am I going to say to this guy? And I'm fairly new to the church. We haven't been there that long, and I don't know these guys really. Some of these guys can be my first time meeting them. And there I see another one, and I see another one, and I see another one. And then I was like, I just got to go talk to the pastor, And so I find him. Hey, I need to talk to you. So we go into a private room. And so I tell him the dream. There was something inside me that told me he knew, but he was like, well, I could see how that would be troubling to you. But I didn't come out and tell him, Gabriel. I didn't say, look, this dream was about pornography, sexual sin, adultery. This demon is after you and your family. I didn't tell him, but somehow, like I knew that he knew. Does that make sense? Like somehow I knew what he knew. I understood what I was talking about without even saying it, but I didn't have the courage to come out and just tell him. But this is what happened. So maybe 2 or 3 months later, I get a call from this guy, and we've since become friends. He's like, "Hey, Dave." I say, "Hey, what's going on?" He goes, "Hey, look, man, the church is done." What? What are you talking about? No, it's over. Then the dream came back to my mind. This thing is not only destroying these families, he's destroying the spiritual strength of the men in the church and their families. And now the church is apart. It's destroying everything. And so I didn't say that to him. I just held it in my mind. Now, as time went along, he starts to, he's like, "Hey, man, we get together." He's like, "Hey, can you get with me? I'm going to be traveling around." Because now, look, this was his livelihood. He's, I believe he's called to ministry, but now he's very well known. He was a very well known worship leader all over Southern California. And so he says, "Will you travel with me and do worship music at different churches?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." I'm still in the military. I've got an income, but I do. We're putting miles on cars, man. We're driving, So we're traveling up there one night and to handle worship, music there and stuff. And he says, if we keep doing this, they're probably going to hire me. As he's talking, all I'm thinking is the dream. Like I can't shake it. Like every time I'm sitting with them, and I'm thinking of it. So finally I said, I've got to tell him. And so I called him by name. I said, "Look, we never talk about this. I don't know if you understand, but I'm going to pretend like you don't. And I'm going to say, look, you remember that dream I had?" And he immediately remembered, "Yeah, I did. That was pretty graphic." I said, "Yeah, brother." I said, "It was." I said, "And that dream was about pornography, adultery, sexual sin. I believe it destroyed the church, brother." I had to tell you that. Have you ever struggled with it? Have you ever had to struggle with it? And he, played it off. And I said, well, I said, brother, I just had to ask you because I never really came out and told you, but I said, but you have to understand that's what that was about. And it had you penned against your house. Well, in the interim, here's what happened. In the interim, he gets the job up there at this church. And I'm going up there constantly to sing worship music with him. And we're, still doing some traveling, even at other places. And him and his wife buy a house by the beach, which they didn't have before. It did strike me when they first bought it. We did a worship service at the beach that was a baptismal, or the church he's hired as now baptizing all these people at the beach out in the open. It was a great witness to the people out there on the beach. And we're singing songs at the beach. People come up out of the waters. We're playing music. We're all raising our hands, singing, praising the Lord. And now sometimes go by, I don't know, maybe a year. And next thing you know, I'm getting a call in the middle of the night. And it's my friend. He was like, Dave, and he's crying. I said, what is going on, brother? He's like, the worst thing. He goes, look, calls his wife by name. She found some stuff on the computer. Now she wants a divorce. She wants me out of the house, all this stuff. And the long and short of it all, he lost his ministry, lost his family. And the dream turned out to be completely prophetic, which if I recount it all right, all this stuff was true in the spiritual realm. The church came apart that we were at. It was after him and his wife and his family, and he got him. They bought a house by the beach, which they didn't have before. And we did that baptismal at the beach where all these young people and some older coming up out of the water with raising their hands, praising God. We're playing music, singing to the Lord. It all came true. What the Lord showed me in the spirit is the complete reality, not some, metaphor, the truth.
Right.
I'd seen that thing before. It was in my face when I was a kid. And this demon, I don't know, it didn't give up till the destruction was done.
And they didn't repent from what they were doing. You warned them. And so it seemed like God gave you a warning, say, hey, you gotta tell them.
Yeah. I didn't have the courage to talk to those guys at that men's prayer breakfast. And then after that, I wish I had, but I did talk to my friend and I know he knew, he knew what I was showing him, or I was telling him what the Lord showed me. He knew what it was because this thing was in his life. And it's just tragic.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But the reality we live in is much more than the natural world. A lot of people don't want to believe that, but that's just the truth. I've witnessed it in many, many times in my life. I talk to people all the time. Obviously, you have your own experiences starting from a very young age. And you had another pretty intense experience now when you were now a police officer. So we talked about a little bit of your time in the military, but you became a police officer. And you had an encounter with someone that was demon possessed. There's some context that needs to be given before, because there was a incident with a woman that happened. So can you explain from what happened with the woman to the demon possessed man, everything that you saw?
Yeah. So I retired in 2002 from the Navy. My wife and I relocated to the East Coast from San Diego, and I became a police officer. Went to the police academy, got hired as a police officer. And look, I'm just going to say this real quick because, again, as I've said, the kid from my background doesn't get to do all the stuff I got to do in the Navy. Traveled to 42 some odd different countries, 8 deployments, all this stuff. And the Lord took care of me through it all. So all that said, so then to become a police officer, it's like, well, okay. I'm going to test the Lord's resolve to protect me. So I become a police officer. And again, I'm saying this just to not to pat myself on the back. I just want to understand the context. He made the way for all of that to happen. He put those things and he put that drive in me, even as a cop, to protect the community and be the best cop I could be and take care of people. And that part of that is going after bad guys, who are destroying their community. So I'm saying all that, that's the context. So I was a very go-getter cop. And because of my time in the military, joined with that, I am here to protect my country and my community, and their rights are an invaluable piece of all that I'm here to do. So that's the context. And But one night, I worked midnights, easily 8 of the, nearly 16 years I was a police officer. And so we're talking like 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. kind of stuff, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. kind of things. And so one night there was this big party. It's in my zone. They send me over and I, send me some backup too, because it's a big party. And I've been in a couple of those where I actually ended up on the ground with some people, drunk and high. So send backup but fortunately people are listening. They turn the music down. They're breaking up the party, whatever. But during that time, as I'm in the middle of this young lady, and she was there. She was a beautiful young lady, very attractive. And of course, now I became a cop at 40, so I'm not some spring chicken. At this time I'm, like 43 years old or whatever, and 43, 44, whatever. And she's, very attractive, probably in her mid to late 20s. And boy, she just was relentless and saying things to me, being close to me, try to give me her number. And of course, I'm like, hey, I'm old enough to be your daddy. Get your stuff and go with everybody else. Get out of here. And even to the point, the guys in my squad, of course, they're all substantially younger than me. All these guys are in the 20s mostly. And they're like, oh, dude, bro, I'd have got that number. I said, look, man, I'm married. I'm old enough to be your daddy. Leave me alone. But guess what? Here's the truth. The truth is, in my mind, after I get to my car, I'm kind of like, my ego's boosted. Like, she's beautiful. Literally, it's like, if you walked into the party, there's 100 people, you would see her immediately. She's that pretty. And so in my mind, I'm going, man, awesome, kind of thing. Well, guess what? I didn't think sexually like, oh, this and this and this, but it was an ego boost. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So that's the context that I wanted you to talk about. So that's not the story, but for the people listening, you need to understand that part in order to understand the next part of the story with the demon possessed man. So now that the stage is set, what happened at that other night?
Well, it was the call. It was one of those calls where the guys, witnesses are seeing this guy selling dope behind a convenience store and late, I don't know, 2:00 in the morning, whatever. And so I get with a buddy, like, hey, come with me, let's get eyes on this guy and see what you see doing the hand to hand. So, and we did see it. Car's pulling up. He's doing hand to hand stuff. I've got binoculars, the whole thing. Good cops is what we do. We build the case where you roll in there and snatch up on somebody. And so make the good case. I'm seeing it, and so we roll up, and my buddy's a big dude, bigger than me even, and played football in college, whatever. So we end up tackling this guy to the ground, get him. He's got a lot of dope on him, a lot of money. But from the moment I had this guy handcuffed and stood him up, I just had this sense, like it just made the hair stand up on the back of my neck and gave me kind of chills. I didn't get it yet, but maybe everybody should understand too. Like, when I became a cop, I fully believe the Lord was in all of that, both to take care of me and financially in life in general, but took care of me out there. There was some close calls as a police officer. There was some sketchy stuff that the Lord, I fully believe, gave me insight to, that kept me safe and saved other people's lives. Guys with guns, this and that, like, just this kind of stuff. Like, guys flee for me in a vehicle. They make a turn. I'm behind them a little ways. They hit me on by, make the turn. By the time I get there, they'll pull up to this duplex. They abandon the car. There's 2 guns in the car, one on each front passenger seat. What they could have done is fully ambush me the moment I made the turn. They could have been waiting, boom, 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 just lit me up, kill me right there in my car. And those kinds of things, like, on a certain level, I believe God put an irrational fear of me in some bad guys that I dealt with to cause them to flee from me instead of fight in a lot of ways. Like, there's multiple stories I get into, but that's the context. So I understood my role on the street as an important one, as a Christian guy, as a guy who's a follower of Christ, who's a saved person. I'm going to intersect with people at crossroads of their life that no one else is going to intersect with them like this, who is going to be a Christian guy who could bring something of value to their soul. So I used to put scriptures on my screen on my computer, my police computer. And now people are like, oh, that separates the church and state, whatever. But I would always pray, like, Lord, give me a scripture to put on there. So everything I was reading in the Bible, something that came to mind, I would put on there. I'd let it marquee across my screen, And so I kept praying about, Lord, give me something that's rubber meets the road that I won't ever have to change out, that's going to impact people who I may have to come in contact with, or may even glance down inside my car and see that scrolling across my computer. So one night I'm driving into work, and I used to always pray on the way in, like, Lord, please protect us out here tonight. Be with us. Help me not dishonor you as I do this job tonight. Help me do what's right in your sight, no matter what goes on. And then one night this came to my mind. When you stand before God, what answer will you give for the life that you lived? So now I had this 72 font red letters marqueing across my computer screen every night on a black screen. And that was my screensaver, just kept rolling across. And had it set up to like every 60 seconds it would come on, And so, and it already impacted a number of people. I had guys crying on the way to jail, like, officer, no, that's true, who I ended up giving the gospel to, praying with before I had to take them into jail. I can't tell you how many guys broke down. My grandma told me about that. We started talking. I'm praying with them on the way to jail, praying with them after I got from jail. I mean, the Lord just made a way. And it wasn't every bad guy. Some of those guys just hated me. They wanted to kill me. It was the truth. It's a true thing. It's that darkness is out there. So there is evil that exists on the streets and in our cities and our communities. It's out there. So, but this particular night, that's the context. So I arrest this guy who's dealing dope, all this money on him, got a bunch of crack on him, all this stuff. And he's in the back of my car. And as I'm filling out my paperwork and now starting to drive to jail, he starts slamming his head against the plexiglass and he's screaming, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" He's this guttural scream from his mouth. It shook me. And I'm like, "What, man? What are you talking about?" And he said a lot of expletives. "That so-and-so stuff on your screen. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Listen, man." And he's screaming at me. So I had to yell, "Listen." And I told him, I said, "I'm going to be on my knees and on my face before the God who saved me, wondering why he saved me, and still thanking him for all he's done for me, and still begging him for forgiveness for my failures, brother. That's where I'm going to be." And he just got silent. And they were still driving. And then we had to hit a stoplight, and as things are quiet in the car now, he says, "You liked that, didn't you?" And except then his voice changed. His voice now was different, guttural sounding. He didn't have to say another word. I knew exactly what he was talking about, Gabriel. He was talking about that girl that night, how I kind of relished the attention, how it boosted my ego, and I liked it. And he spoke directly to me and that thing. He knew, and I knew that he knew. And it shook me. It gave me chills, and it scared me, quite honestly. And when he said, "You liked that, didn't you?" And then he said, "I see you, brother." I knew demons. Look, I said it before. They're assigned to us. They're watching us. He would love to get his hands on me, but I'm a saved child of the King. He can't touch me. He can't get at me like that. But he sees me. They know our thoughts. They know what we're up to. They know what we're about. They know how to make us fall, and they're after us. They hate us. And so that's just the reality. And that's what God has saved us from.
Yeah. Like you were talking about as a child, you were talking about how in part one that you saw what the world was and what God was taking us out of with that demon that you saw when you were 5 years old. And I like your story. This story that you just told about the man that was in your car. Because a lot of people that are not used to spirituality, the only thing they see about demon possession or demons is the horror movies. And are there instances like that? Yes, those things do happen, but they're extremely rare. That's not what demons usually look like. It's mostly what you experience, something like that. They have supernatural knowledge of certain things, and someone starts speaking in a slightly different voice or starts acting like completely out of control, like slamming their heads onto something. That's mostly what it looks like, but it comes from the same place. It's the same beings that are in charge of those things. But I think, like I said, it's a good thing for you to tell your story like this, because it reminds people that, it's not because you don't see someone foaming at the mouth that demons are not there. And to end this story, because we've been going on for a while already, I want to ask you, throughout all the time that you spent in the military and as a police officer, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned?
Probably with all I've seen, Gabriel, and the things I've been led to do, that humanity is broken. Broken. It is in a broken state. And without the Lord as Savior, we have no hope. And we are at the mercy of these demonic forces without the Lord's work and protection in our lives, at their complete mercy. We have zero hope of overwhelming them, of breaking free of those chains. There is nothing that's going to stop them except the Lord Jesus, except God's love, except His power. Nothing. Their power is immense. And as human flesh, we have zero hope of breaking those chains, and humanity is broken. I've been all over the world. I didn't even tell everything. Like, obviously, there's only so much time to tell your whole life story. But as an example, we're in Singapore. We pulled into Singapore years. This is back in the late 80s. We're in Singapore, go to a Hindu temple, which as a Christian guy, I should have never been in. Let's be real. But I was curious, like, what do you have in you? And so I'm in there, I'm looking at it, and there's this Hindu god, one of like a 200 million that they have, I guess, what I've been told. And it's this god has like 6 arms. He's pulling babies apart, and it shows him like he's, it's a big giant ceramic statue, and it's colored, like, it's in color, and you can see where he's eating babies and stuff. It's just crazy. I'm like, what is that? And I just started praying, like, Lord, I'm going to get out of here. I'm like, forgive me for even coming in here. And so before I even turned to leave, this old gentleman, who's, I guess his job is to take care of the temple, he comes over and starts hitting me with a stick that he had in his hands. He's beating me with this bamboo stick. Yeah, true story. And so I'm like, whoa, I'm like, jeez, man. Now he doesn't hurt me. I'm here to protect myself. But, he's a little guy. But I get out, and my buddy's with me. He's a guy about my size. He's like, why is he hitting you? I said, I didn't say it, but I thought I went, because the Spirit of the Lord is in me. The demonic forces that are in him hate me. And there you go. And so that's, I thought about it later, and that's exactly what that's about. I should have never been in there, first of all, but that's what that was about. They're using him to try to get at me. Right. And so, I believe it. I've seen it too many times. The Lord has shown me too many things. He's protected me too many times for me to go, oh, it's just chance. And, chance with opportunity equals everything's fine. No, not so much. Not so much. So, yeah.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Almost False podcast. If you want to hear the beginning of this conversation, head over to Locals, where we post the unreleased footage from our interviews, where we also have the after show in which you can get to know our guests more personally and hear about what their life is like now. The link is in the description. Have a great day and stay blessed.